everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We're just going to give it a couple more seconds as people are starting to trickle in. But in the meantime, there is a chat pod button at the very bottom of your screen. Let us know that you can hear us, that you can hear me, and you can also say what college you're representing as we wait for folks to trickle in. All right, I'm going to just keep on waiting for some folks. I see the numbers increasing. I'll give a couple more seconds before we start. Oh, great, from Santa Fe College in Florida, River Parish. All right, our good friend, Chancellor Rick. Oh no, Rick Bateman's not there. Yes, he's at another one. Sorry about that. But he's in Louisiana too. Perfect. Dr. Phelan, thank you for joining us. Hello from California. Good, Northeast Iowa Community College. Yes, you are right. Bossier Parish. Thank you for that. Well, everybody, thank you for joining. I think we can get started. You are joining today's webinar, which is all about the intersection of the working learner and just how that intersects with their studies at the college. My name is Linda Garcia. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Community College Student Engagement. I am joined by three guests today, and they are from Southcentral Kentucky Community and Technical College. We have President Phil Neal, Provost James McCaslin, and we also have Vice President of Student Affairs, Brooke Justice. And I'm so glad they are joining us today. I've asked them to help me look at the data of the national report that we released, but also tie it to what they're doing at their college. So they'll talk about that, and they'll also talk about how that's impacted, how the pandemic has impacted their efforts. Before we begin this conversation, just two things. I just want to say thank you to the Trellis Foundation, because without them, we could have not created this report or had this discussion today. And also, if you just have any questions or you have any comments, there is an icon at the bottom of your screen. It's called Q&A. Please feel free to type any comments, questions there. At the end of our conversation, my colleague, Cordy Atkins, will join us, and she'll make sure that your questions are answered or your comments are shared with our panelists today. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to start with Phil and just talk about some of our data that we found in this national report that was released. And it was really focused on the entering student population. And just to let our audience know today, just a couple of data points. In the data results that we looked into, 69% of those students said they work for pay. Now, let me just say that this represents over 20,000 entering students that responded to the survey. 69% of those work for pay. Almost a third of them work over 40 hours. And 64% say that being a student and also being an employee, they're equally important to them at this time. So Phil, let me start with you. You and your team have been looking at students, entering students, making sure that they're connected to jobs. When we did this report, I know you were working at this time because you reached out and said, Linda, we are also doing this. We have a story to share. So tell us how you got started with this at your college.
Well, thank you, Linda. I appreciate you having us on today and allowing us to share our journey. And we recognize this is our journey. We've taken nuggets of information from probably many that are with us today in the webinar and brought the ideas back over the years. And we hope that we can share a few nuggets with you about our experience. And if you're not familiar with our college, Southcentral Kentucky Community and Technical College, we call ourselves SCI, or SCI CTC for short, if you hear us use those acronyms. We were based originally out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is about an hour directly north of Nashville, Tennessee, but we serve a 10-county region in our area, and we'll have about 15,000 credit and non-credit students per year, about equally split down the middle. So I want to talk as I give some background about some of the data that we're seeing today at our college. And I want to take us back in time a little bit and tell you how we got here from looking at the working adult learner, which we really kind of get away from the 25 and older population, although I think that's an important distinction. We're really, everybody coming to our college today, as the data is showing, is looking at ways of working while they're going to college. But if we look at the data today, and we've looked at it over the last few years, and it's fairly consistent, about a little over 80% of our students that we have are reporting that they're working while going to college. And we look at that from three different vantage points. In our career and academic advising center, which is kind of the front door for a lot of our students coming in and getting advising, anywhere from 80 to 90% of those students that are coming to us for the first semester are reporting that they want a class schedule that's flexible enough to allow them to work. When we look back at our SESI survey data from 2016, 2018, and 2020, of course, that's several semesters in for most of these students, it's averaging 83 to 84% of them saying that they're working at the time that they're taking that SESI survey in the spring. And then we also survey our students on the back end, what we call our graduate survey. And for several years now, it's been fairly consistent, around 82% of our graduates saying they worked while they were going to college with us. So that low to mid 80% range is fairly consistent, whether we're talking about incoming students, the middle of the path students, and students have completed on the back end. But what we're seeing today, and I'll get into why I believe some of this is happening, is that we're seeing that 25 and older population growing again. Matter of fact, this spring we have more than we had last spring, and last spring was a record enrollment for us of students. We also saw last year record graduation and retention rates at a time when the economy was really thriving until COVID hit, obviously. And we've converted over the last 4 or 5 years nearly all of our programs, as well as our general education pathways, to what we call work and learn models, or by name, we call them Skyflex, which is an umbrella term, meaning that we have different ways of allowing the student to flexibly get their education by having to be on campus less, which allows them to work more. But it didn't happen overnight. And so if you'll indulge me for just a minute, I think it's important in this discussion that of why work and learn has become so front and center nationally for us. If we take a step back a few years, and I'll take us back to 2008, that was a real line of demarcation, I think, in higher education, where because of the recession hit so hard and there were so many people being laid off, we just saw huge waves of students come into our campuses, both for community colleges and universities, but I think more so at the community college level, that were being laid off. And so they were turning to higher education. And from what we've seen in past recessions, 6 to 18 months later, most of the recession ends and people are going back to work. And so we had really three things happening at this college at that time, 2008, 2009. We had this huge wave of students coming in volumes we'd never seen before. And we knew that, number one, they're going to have possibly slightly different student engagement needs and student success needs. Number two, that very same population, if history holds, we're probably going to be enticed away in 6 to 18 months to go back to work when the jobs come back, if history were to hold. And number three, as companies started to rehire in about 2009, 2010, we were hearing the whole topic of soft skills, work ethic. High school graduates, college graduates don't have the work ethic skills that industry was wanting. So those three things were front and center for us. And we knew that we had to do some things to address all of those if we wanted to manage the students that we had, but also ensure that they're successful in some kind of credential attainment, which is our monetary way of our way of looking at a success in students, is the attainment of a credential that prepares them for a career. How do we get that before they're enticed back away from us to go to work when the jobs return? And so as that whole evolution of the economy started to roll itself out and the jobs started to come back, we were finding employers reaching out to try to grab every student they can. And in some cases, they were saying, we don't even care about the credential. We just need a warm body to fill a job. Matter of fact, some of them were saying the credential requires them to pay more. And so they were actually not necessarily pushing credential attainment as the jobs started to come back. And so the labor demand was outpacing our graduate production. And so we really wanted to do some things on that front. Also, how do we deal with work ethic when that's kind of a deeply ingrained core trait to people. And as we started to see more and more jobs come back, and then the Trump administration came in, we started seeing from the White House on out the push to get people into jobs, solidify the economy, grow the economy, and the whole apprenticeship thing came on the forefront of work and learn models that could support registered and non-registered apprenticeship style programs. So we as a college, as we were working through all that from 2008 on forward, we realized we needed to make some change, or change wasn't going to happen for these students, and we were going to face some outcomes that we didn't want to see for our students and for our employers. So we really had to take some bold moves. And at the time, we actually adopted a mantra that came out of SESI. At the time, the students don't do optional mantra is something we grabbed onto, and we looked at a lot of the SESI research and some of our data. We said there's a number of practices that we make optional right now that if we just made mandatory, took that bold move, as scary as it may be, it might lead to better student outcomes, such as student orientation, academic advising, don't start classes late, even mentoring. So we just took some bold leaps and tried to, back each other up on this thing and know that there was no guarantee. And we implemented those strategies. And from there, once we started doing that, we started seeing good student success. We knew that we had to do these kinds of things at scale. And I think that's one of the most important things that we need to think through is we didn't have the resources. We were a smaller college. We couldn't boutique ourselves to death. We couldn't develop a program for this small population and that small population. We had to take these good practices to scale immediately. So that's what we did on a number of those fronts. That then gave us, taking bold moves and taking things to scale, gave us the courage to tackle the soft skills. So our faculty really jumped out there and worked with industry and said, what do you need us to ingrain in these students in the classroom, both technical and general education classrooms? So they came back with, we need them to come to work on time and put in a full day's work and be professional and participate in class and communicate effectively. So our faculty built all this into a program that we called Workplace Ethics and built that in. That was about 2011. And then once we started doing all of that, we realized the jobs were really coming back in droves. We needed to change the way that we delivered our services from a student affairs standpoint and from an academic standpoint that as Dr. Carnival said, as the intro quote to your study, colleges need to do a better job of providing the right support services to enrich the working students, have the means to reach graduation and gainful employment. We realized that on a number of different fronts. So we started to transform a number of things that we did, both the way we offered our classes to allow the students to work and go to school, and as well as the transformation that really, it changed every one of our onboarding and student affair wraparound services that you'll hear more about here in just a little bit. So I say all that from kind of a timeline historical perspective, that there are reasons why we're so focused on work and learn models today, and we're seeing such high rates of students work while they go to school. But this work doesn't happen overnight. And any of us have been in the business for more than just a few years know that this takes time, and it takes some bold, scary steps with no guarantee of results. And so I think what we've learned along the way, you got to have the courage to change, and you got to have the patience to see it through. You got to take some bold steps at scale, and you got to give your folks permission to try and fail. Those are just some of the things that we've learned, and out of that have come for us stabilized enrollment at a time when we have record high rates of students that are being employed, which those two typically don't go hand in hand. We see record high retention and graduation rates. Our equity gaps have improved dramatically over the years. And we're seeing record high job placement rates, which is really exciting, and transfer success rates. So once they leave us, we have one of the highest job placement rates in Kentucky companies 3 years after graduation, at 82.3% of our graduates employed in the state. And then we're also seeing our transfer students, when they get to the universities, they're completing bachelor's degrees at a 5 to 10% higher clip than native university students. So we're seeing a lot of good outcomes come, and it's not necessarily simply because we changed the way we offer our classes or simply because we required academic advising. It's really a conglomeration, if that's the right word, of a lot of practices that have been put in place over the years.
Now, Phil, I'm going to stay with you for a bit before I go on to your other colleagues. You talked about the cultural change. There's big leaps. There took courage, transformation. There was patience. There was change. All of these words, which absolutely it takes time to just change. So when you were going through this journey, your colleagues, your whole campus, the college, the students, the faculty and staff were going along with this journey. I'm sure it was not easy. What was maybe one challenge that you felt like you had to overcome or get everyone involved? And what was that challenge and what did you learn from it? Because this was a big lift.
It was, and I've got a concrete example I'll give you. But I think you have to decide as an organization, do you want to be a top-down leadership kind of organization, or do you want to be a grassroots shared governance kind of model? Because you could accomplish it either way. I think one is better than the other, obviously. And we really believe in a shared governance model. But that takes time. It's a lot easier to just say, okay, Phil Neal made a decision, or James McCaslin made a decision, or Brooke Justice made a decision, go with it. But to have people have buy-in across your college, I think is much more powerful. And that's what we tried to do from the very beginning. And so I'll go all the way back to 2009, 2010, when our faculty were working on that workplace ethics a program that they were putting in the classroom, where students had to mimic the behaviors in a classroom that industry was saying they have to have out there in the workforce. The faculty were sitting there saying, how do we do this? Do we have permission to do this? And of course, the administration comes in and says, sure, you have the right to do this. But they all turned to each other and said, if we're going to do this, we have to do this together, and we have to do it at scale, because when we all participate, we back each other up, so to speak. And there was a level of camaraderie that I've never seen before. And for them to know we had their back as administration, for them to come in together and try something that was scarier than we've ever done before. Because the first thing that'll happen as soon as you try to raise the bar or set higher expectations is the fear will enter. What if the students don't like it and they go running away from your institution? Well, we gave permission to give it a shot, because all the data said, if you set high expectations, they will rise and they will meet the expectations. It's exactly what happened. But it didn't happen without fear, but because we did it as a team and we voted to do this, our faculty voted unanimously to have each other's back. It really built a sense of camaraderie, full teamwork, all in it together. Nobody's going to be hung out there by themselves, so to speak, by experimenting with a new idea. And then when we started to see the results, we reinforced the heck out of that decision with celebrations and whatnot to let them know that the investment on the return on that investment was worth it. And I think that just perpetuates and strengthens your organizational culture every time you can do that. But the reinforcement of all these good strategies, I think, is really important. Matter of fact, I've got on my desk here the President's Innovation Cup. We started giving out a cup every year to a part of the college that really ventured out there with a significant innovation that worked for us. And so many of the things we're talking about today, those parts of the college receive that innovation cup for that as a way of reinforcing taking these risks.
Well, congratulations on receiving that cup. And as we all know, looking at data could be fearful. There's also areas that will make us celebrate as well. And when we're looking at our data for this report, here are just a couple of nuggets, my friends, today that I'm going to ask James about. 17% of entering students who work said they would miss class because of work, at least once in the first 3 weeks of class. 36% of entrant students who work report that working makes it difficult for them to take the courses that they need. So, James, let me ask you this question. Tell us some of the concerns when you were looking at the data. What stood out, and how did that help redesign the student experience at your campus?
Well, thanks so much for having me today. And I'd like to especially thank Dr. Neal for taking all of my pre-prepared answers in his opening statements. One of the things, I think that we still have the blessing of size. We're still small enough that all of the faculty know each other. We all get to know our students on a very intimate level. And so the fact that, we have 83 to 84% of our students working, we know that that's the case. We're trying to make sure that, as we always talk to ourselves as well, there's got to be a balance there. So we talk about work-life balance, but we try to impress upon our students that you really do have to balance school with your other work and home responsibilities. And that's not an easy thing to do. You can't just say it and expect them to understand it. But what we can do is meet them halfway. And so we design our courses now to accommodate people who may be on different shifts. That was really one of the pushes in our advanced manufacturing division when we started SkyFlex. It's all about flexible delivery. And that entire division works together to begin doing lecture capture so students can do all of their lecture and their didactic in an online Blackboard environment, highly integrated, and it's not just sage on the stage recording and you do this. You have to actually interact with the material, and then you have to take some type of quiz that says, yes, I'm ready to go and do my welding assignment or do my machining assignment, but you have multiple opportunities to go into labs. So now the lab is so much more flexible, and students really just use like a sign-up genius to pick whatever lab time they're going to do, because we have lots of business and industry in our areas that do a 3-shift rotating shift every couple of weeks. So a student can't sign up for a Monday morning 9 a.m. lab course and expect to be able to do that. So we've tried to adjust as much as we can. We've also really engaged all of the employers in our area, be it manufacturing or healthcare or information technology. You know, I know all of us are required to have advisory committees, but our advisory committees don't just come in and have lunch once a semester and say, yeah, everything looks great. We really do engage them as partners so that they understand that the school is just as important as the work that they're doing. I think that's where we've been successful with our Sky FAME program. For those of you who may not know, the FAME program, Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education, is a nationwide program now, but it actually started in Georgetown, Kentucky, with our sister college, Bluegrass Community and Technical College, and Toyota Motor Manufacturing. And it was a program that was designed hand in hand with a specific industry where they had complete input into the delivery modality. They had complete input into the curriculum that we were going to deliver. And it was set up so that students were selected on the front end to be sponsored by a company. The students are with us 2 days a week for the full day, and then they work at the sponsoring company the other 3 days a week. At the end of 5 terms, they go fall, spring, summer, fall, spring. They graduate with over 1,800 hours of work experience. They have a full associate in applied science and advanced manufacturing, and they've had an almost 2-year job interview with that particular company. It is something that has spread throughout the state of Kentucky and is now in, I think, 13 states. Just a few months ago, Opportunity America and the Brookings Institution did a report on FAME USA, as it is now called. It's recently been transferred from Toyota to the National Association of Manufacturers, and now it's everything. In fact, our FAME chapter was one of the first ones that did not have an automotive manufacturer in the initial group. So we have 15 to 16 different employers in our 10-county area who meet monthly now that are engaging with our faculty and our students. And so I think it takes that level of collaboration. It's not just, oh, the schools have to change everything they're doing to accommodate the students. It is a true partnership between the students, the employers, and what we're doing at the college.
So James, I mean, those are great points, and you're just making me think of connecting this to guided pathways, especially Pillar 3 helps students stay on the path. The experience that your college is providing with this program, it's intentional. When you're thinking about this redesign and especially engaging employers, and you're collaborating with them, tell us, how did you connect with these employers? How did that happen?
We've always had good advisory committee meetings and advisory councils, but I think we were very intentional in making sure that we engaged with all of the human resources groups that are in the area. I personally served on the workforce development board for our 10-county area for the last 5 years. And so you really have to get out and meet them where they are and actually impress upon them that we're not just trying to check a box to make sure that our accreditation stays above board anymore. We really do want your input. think that's probably a key difference in the FAME program is we remind ourselves and them every single time that we meet every month. This is an employer-led curriculum. And that's a completely different way for people to start thinking about, particularly people in post-secondary education, to want to give up some of that control that we're so used to because we're all the experts in the room. They have the expertise of knowing what is needed right now. And as long as we're able to, check our own pride at the door and listen to what they have to say, some wonderful partnerships develop out of that. Now, in terms of guided pathway work, I think that there have been both internal and external forces that have impacted that. I would say for us, I've been with the college since 2011, but I just became the provost last year. And one of my first things that I really wanted to focus on was a 2-year course rotation. And part of that, with 2 big reasons. One is financial aid regulations have changed so much now, and program applicability is really saying the feds are not going to pay for any more electives. You've got to take the exact number of courses that you need to take, get them through, get them finished as absolutely as quickly as they can. But more importantly, I want to be able to sit down with a student who knows what they want to do or is willing to work with us on some of our self-developed program pathways that we've laid out and say, okay, you say you want to go into polysonography. Here are all the courses that you need to take semester by semester. And I can break it down now, the exact days, the exact times, and the exact instructors that are going to do it for the next 2 years so they can plan their life better with their family obligations, with their employer. And we then make that guarantee. We're going to offer it when we say we're going to offer it.
Great. So now let me just turn to Brooke. James, you spoke about the instruction side of it, but Brooke, you're on the student affairs side. So tell us more about how this has impacted just the whole student experience in regards to student affairs. What has changed? Maybe what has stayed the same? What have you learned?
Sure. Once again, thank you for having me as well. I think it's important to note all of the statements that they have made previously and how that impacts our conversation that we're able to have with students. It's not just a conversation about, well, you can do this, but you have to give up your job or you have to give up your, whatever else you're doing. It gives us an opportunity to have the and conversation basically. So yes, we will support you in doing this and you can maintain your employment. You have the opportunity to explore whether it's considered an internship or as Dr. McCaslin mentioned with the FAME program, you have the opportunity to get the experience at the same time and you are gaining that educational credential as well. So this is critical. We recently made a shift to having advising in our student services division as well. And so as we are speaking with incoming students, we have an opportunity to look at them and ask them the question, what are you interested in? What really, makes you tick? And basically that gives us an opportunity to look at our career exploration model that we have created. And they can also complete that assessment to determine what would be the area that they're more inclined to participate and to engage in as far as a career pathway is concerned.
And so, and this could be a question for you or maybe for James or Phil, but you talked about equity. I mean, equity, that conversation has really been amplified at your campus, but you've also seen some changes, with the student subgroup. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, that's correct. So over the past few years, we have recognized an increase in our minority and underrepresented minority student population to the point where we are mirroring what our regional population represents. So specifically in this spring semester, we are up to around an 18% underrepresented minority population. And so that we've seen that grow. And most recently, we've been completing work towards our diversity initiatives that have also helped us to recognize increases in our credentials awarded to our underrepresented minority population, as well as our low income. So that's very promising to see graduation rates rise and to help us to close those achievement gaps.
I'd like to add that one of the things that Brooke led was some transformation within student services, and thank goodness they ushered it in more than a year before COVID hit, and that was a complete transformation of the way that we meet students through all of the student affairs services and financial aid services. That we went to more of an individualized, customized model instead of the mass cattle call for orientation and whatnot. Every student has an individual session for admissions and orientation that's tailored to them. Academic advising and career exploration or career pathways is all individualized now, and it can be done in person, it can be done remotely, it can be done in a variety of different ways that makes that student feel special. But more to the point of what we're seeing in society, we've got a real shopper mentality out there amongst people across America, that they want that customized, individualized experience. And so as we were starting to make that transition in the academic side of the house and make the classes more flexible to customize around their life, student services, back to Dr. Carnival's comment in the national study, we have to make the students wraparound support services customized to the students as well. And I think the combination of those two things allow students from all backgrounds to, particularly from our underrepresented minority and low income students who are very much likely to hold more than one job. It allows them the flexibility to have things tailored to their needs. And I think that's why we're seeing some of the gains that we're having in those populations.
And Dr. Neal, if I could, I'll throw in, because someone had typed in a question earlier: how do you institute mandatory new student orientation and counseling when students work? And you address that. You know, we'll meet them wherever they are. But as we said from the very beginning, students don't do optional. So we do mandate that they go through an orientation process, even if it is individualized. We do mandate that they have an advising session every semester before they register. And it would probably surprise a lot of the callers that are on watching us today. We don't release students to register themselves. Okay. They have to have an advising appointment, and then we put them in the classes that we know they need to make satisfactory academic progress and to meet all the program applicability guidelines.
I mean, that's wonderful news, because when the students begin at the college the first time they're entering, we hear a lot in our focus groups from students that, you know, they're excited, but they're scared. They don't know what the plan is, but having someone guiding them through that from entry to completion, I mean, how wonderful it is to hear that your college is doing. I know many colleges, especially our friends who are on today, I'm sure they're also doing that, and they're tackling that as well. But let's go back into the classroom, and I'll ask James and Brooke too. What we learned about was awareness of students who are working. So for example, we learned that students who completed this module, 83% of entering students said, my instructors don't know how many hours I'm working per week. 81% of entering students said that a staff member did not help them decide how to balance the number of classes or compared to the number of hours they're working. You know, those conversations are not occurring, they're being missed. You know, what if they were occurring? What would, how would that student interact maybe with their academic journey, or how would they be more engaged? Brooke, let me just go back to you. How do you train your advisors and other staff members to have these conversations with students?
We do have basically an incoming student survey, for lack of better terms, that they complete to let us know, what does your life entail? Like, do you have children at home? Do you have a work schedule that you have to manage? And do you have, you know, other things that compromise your time? And so that's critical in making sure that we incorporate that into the conversation. If you do have to get a child off the bus at 2:00 in the afternoon, that means that you can't be in class at 2:00 in the afternoon. So we need to have that conversation and determine, you know, exactly what it is that is infringing upon your time that you have available to study in the evening. And also, so does that mean that you can take an evening course or that you cannot? So that is a critical part of the conversation that our advisors do have. And most importantly, we want to make the conversation a conversation. It's not just someone sitting there directing you and basically telling you, okay, you can and you cannot do this. But we want to make sure we understand, do you have concerns about something? Is it something that I can help you to direct you to other resources on campus or in the community that can influence and impact your success?
Now, have those conversations changed because we're in this pandemic world? Just are there different questions that are being asked to students
Most
to get to know
definitely.
them? Mhm.
Yes, you definitely still have to address something that we do take pride in having on campus is mental health support. And so we want to make sure that we have contact with, and we can help the student to make contact with the counselor. And if there are times that you just need someone to talk to, then it's a time that we can help to facilitate and help to make sure that that takes place. In addition to that, if you need support such as food insecurity or other things, we do have some resources that we can share with the student and help to make sure that they are aware.
And
I'd
James,
also like to add that we have the blessing in our system. Any student that is going for an Associate of Arts or an Associate in Science is mandated to take the first year experience course. And that's where a lot of these tools and tips and tricks on not only time management, but on how to talk to your instructors about all of the things that you're juggling really come to play. I think mandatory FYE is awesome, but I'm biased.
yeah, and James, and I was just going to ask you, how does the college encourage faculty just to have those conversations? Yeah.
Yeah, I think as Brooke said earlier, we like to think in terms of and rather than or. So actually our faculty are the front line in trying to help students find employment while they are still in school. So they really do understand the nature of the balance that needs to go on. We've already talked about the FAME program and the FLEX program, but even in our nursing program now, we're doing dedicated educational units where one of the local hospitals is partnering with us, identifying students that they really want to recruit and having them do their clinical experience at that hospital, again, as a trial run to see if they're going to make a good employee.
And before I ask my colleague, Courtney Atkins, to join us to share some of the questions that we have received, let me just ask one question to our panel today. Out of everything that you have done to redesign the student experience, even to looking at the data, getting everybody on board, what would you do differently? Looking back, is there something you thought, oh, we should have done this earlier on rather than later? Or, just anything. What was learned?
I'll jump in and I'll start. One of the things that I think is still a challenge, and I don't know at what point you put more emphasis on it. I just think it's one of those never-ending chores that you have, is to try to help industry better understand what we're doing to make these changes. Some that have been involved with us for many years or helped build some of these programs, like the FAME program that Dr. McCaslin was talking about, they get it. And some, it's kind of news to their ears. I think there's too much of a misbelief about higher education in general, that it hasn't changed the way it's done things in 400 years. You know what I mean? But we're really trying to change the way that we're doing things to help people go to work while advancing their skill sets. And where we have done this, where industry has recognized that industry now becomes our recruiters. The HR managers are now hiring Joe and Jane off the street with very little skill sets, putting them into an entry-level job, and they say your continued employment is contingent upon you finishing your education, bringing every semester more skills back to the job site, and then they move them up and advance them within the organization. Those kinds of partnerships in a tight labor market in particular, as it has been prior to COVID, and I think it will be again, are so valuable because as we think of recruitment mainly being in the high schools and with the workforce investment boards and those sorts of things, these industries all of a sudden, once the light bulb goes on, that if the student only, if my employee, if I can hire Joe or Jane and they only have to be out of work 1 to 2 days a week to go out to the college, and that can be flexible in the time of day and day of the week, I can work their schedule around that and I can fill my jobs. That helps keep my company going. That is a piece I think if I had to look back and say, I wish we would have hit that harder earlier on, and I would still say the same thing today, we need to hit it harder and more frequently, I think would really help propel this effort to move it forward even faster and larger scale.
Good, thank you. So Courtney, if you can join us and let us know what questions we have received from our friends today.
Hi, Linda. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And thank you again to our Sky CTC colleagues who have joined us today. It's been really informative. You know, one question that came up for me, and maybe James is the person to answer this, but how has COVID impacted the work that you're doing with industry and with employers?
Well, on the credit side of the house, we were actually ahead of the curve. So because we had already moved to Skyflex a few years ago, when we had to shut down and go completely remote last March, that was no big deal to our advanced manufacturing students, and in many respects, even to our allied health and nursing students, because they were already so flexible in their delivery. We were very fortunate to be able just to say, okay, you're going to do more of this in a remote environment. And then we were fortunate that in May of last year, our governor allowed us special dispensation for the advanced manufacturing students and the allied health and nursing students to come back and finish up any lab work or clinical work that they needed. So we had very few students that had to take an incomplete in those areas at all. They were all able to come back and finish up. I always laugh and say, gosh, it was nice that we had that crystal ball and we implemented all this early. We just know that we were going to have to do it for COVID related reasons.
Yeah, that's great. Another question that came to mind was President Neal, you said that, you know, about 80%, I think around 80% of your students work, you know that, and that your non-traditional age student population is growing, or students 25 and older. And when we did this study, we found that non-traditional age students and part-time students were the ones who were definitely most likely to work over full-time or over 40 hours a week. So I was just curious if you have any special supports built in for part-time students, particularly who you know are working just a ton.
Well, I think the flexible nature accommodates part-time and the full-time students, because really, but you know, when 80+% of your students are working, even if they're working part-time and going to school part-time together, that's a full-time job, so to speak. I think the flexible nature of what we've done does provide that level of support, and by being able to access your advisor and your financial aid and all that stuff virtually or remotely, I guess I should say is the better word, means that they don't have to come to campus for things that they can just as easily do. Now, I think honestly, COVID has propelled the acceptance of that model even faster and further than any of us ever thought we could. So I think as Dr. J was saying, we having some of these things in place prior to COVID, it really wasn't easy. Don't get me wrong. Nothing about the last year has been easy for anybody, but I think there was a lot fewer hurdles for our students to overcome, because a number of these infrastructure pieces had already been changed to allow for a working adult, whether they're working 15 hours a week or 60 hours a week. Back to his point about some of the laboratory work, you know, if a student is working 60 hours one week and 20 hours the next week, for example, they can move their labs around on which day of the week they want to come in, depending on the program, of course. And it can change, it can adapt. We've got, like I said, all of our services can be face-to-face or remote. And I think that accommodates students of all type. I will say, one of the things that I have believed since the beginning of this journey is that when you take things to scale, and we learned this with mentoring when we were, let me finish the thought first before I talk about mentoring. When you take things to scale, it's applicable to all students. And what we have found is it is beneficial for all students if we pick the right strategies to implement. And when we were looking at mentoring programs, we didn't have them. A lot of your other colleges around the country and some on this call had them before we did. But we were very interested about 6 or 7 years ago about the push for African-American male retention. And mentoring programs for that population was very popular. So we started looking into that because we had a very poor retention rate of our African-American males. Once we started doing the research and finding out how powerful it was for that population, we also simultaneously realized it was just as good for our Latinas and for our other students, our low-income students and everybody who didn't fall into those categories. And so we took it immediately to scale, saying if it's good for one population, it doesn't matter if they're full-time, part-time, the racial demographic, whatever, it's good for everybody. And I think that's part of the power of what we've done is the things that we know work. We took it to scale immediately, and we took it to scale for all students. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but those are some of the things I think that will help regardless of the category that the students fall in.
Yeah, certainly. And you know, that case management kind of approach that you all talked about earlier too, I'm sure is helpful when students are part-time. And having the orientation, meeting the students where they are, you know, if it's a one-on-one or if it's a group setting, as you talked about. So yeah, thank you. And a couple people have asked if we could repeat who you are, because I think they joined us a couple of minutes late. So if we could ask you all to introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful. President Neal, can you start, please?
I'm Phil Neal. I'm president of Southcentral Kentucky Community and Technical College.
Thank you. And James, please.
Hey, everybody, I'm James McCaslin, but most people call me Dr. J. I'm the provost here at SkyCTC.
Thank you. And Brooke, please.
Hello, I'm Brooke Justice, Vice President of Student Services.
Thank you, Brooke. And Linda, I think that's all the questions we have right now. So I'll turn it back over to you at this point.
Thank you, Courtney. And I'm just seeing a question in our chat from Christy. She's asking, are you willing to share your onboarding survey? We're looking to develop something similar.
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, it does include questions about the demands on the students' time and also, you know, if there are specific interest areas and just whatever could be perceived as a barrier to the student schedule and or their overall success.
And Brooke, if you don't mind, the best way that Christy can contact you or maybe others would be via email.
Yes, that's fine. Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
Sure. I don't know if you want me to put that in chat.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
I'm typing it for you, Brooke.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. I think those are all the questions that we had. So I just want to thank our panelists, Dr. Neal, Dr. McCaslin, Dr. Justice. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your story. We're going to have, this is recorded, my friends. We will send this out to you, even those folks, maybe your colleagues who were not able to join us. But we are so happy to hear the story of everything that you've been doing at your campus. I mean, great nuggets, learning moments for us. And I'm sure many folks will take that back to their colleagues and have more conversations about it. For our friends today, if you want access to our report, please know it is on our website. Something that's coming up at the center. We are focused on students in need, so stay tuned. Currently, this spring semester, colleges who are administering SESI are administering that module. Colleges who administer in the fall are sent survey. That will be the module as well. And we also have a race and ethnicity module this coming spring for colleges who are interested, who are SESI colleges in this current administration. So many things happening at the center, but stay tuned. We have more stories to tell about students and helping colleges identify those just aha moments on things that matter to them in regards to the student engagement experience. So everybody, thank you. Have a great day. And panelists, thank you so much for joining us. All right, take care. Bye-bye.